So thank you so much for inviting me here. I'm happy to be here. And I guess my goal is to share my life journey and everything about Hinduism in about 40 minutes. So that's what we're going to attempt to do. Well, a little bit about myself before we get into all different components of my story. I am a Hindu monk. I've been a Hindu monk for about 14 years. I live right on the Lower East Side, so it took me about 15 minutes to get here on the F train. And I grew up in Southern California, in Los Angeles, where days like this are very rare, warm and sunny. We lived in California some time, but eventually we ended up moving to the East Coast. Currently, I serve as a chaplain at Columbia and other places, and basically engage with students and the student community. A lot of times what that means is, as a chaplain, that I'm involved with students, listening to things that they're going through in their lives, helping them spiritually or personally in different levels. As a monk, as you can see, I'm wearing saffron-colored robes, and the saffron-colored robes are worn by many monastic traditions within India, but not all monastic traditions. Some traditions, monastic traditions within India, wear white color robes. The idea is, behind any color is simplicity. And you don't have to worry about what you're going to wear in the morning. It's just kind of simple. And as a monk, I also have a shaved head. And we see that many traditions, monastic traditions, also have a shaved head. Like the Buddhist traditions, they also have a shaved head. The Franciscans, they have like a shaved portion in the middle of their head, but hair around. And then I also have a marking on my forehead. And this marking here represents actually the footprint of God. And the idea is we're trying to humble ourselves before God, placing God's feet on our head. So that's a little bit about my outfit. Now I'll tell you a little bit about my own journey and how I explored Hinduism. So growing up in Southern California, I grew up in Glendale. Anybody here from LA by any chance? I always like to wonder. Okay. You're all locals here. So I grew up in Los Angeles, in Glendale, California. It's close to Burbank and Pasadena, where the Rose Parade takes place. In Glendale, we were pretty much the only Hindu family. There were no other Indians in Glendale when I moved there in the early 80s, because we moved to this country in 1980. And the nearest Hindu community was about 30 miles away. So I was pretty much disconnected from the Hindu community for the first 14 years in this country. So my first real Hindu friend that I had was in my second year of college. So went from basically second grade to second year of college without having much friendship with anybody from the Hindu community, Indian community. So I was pretty much the only Asian kid until my junior high school in many places. So, it was just basically, I was it. There was all other nationalities, but no Asians, no Indians. So I grew up very disconnected from my Hinduism. And so, you could wonder, I went from being completely disconnected to living as a Hindu monk now, as a monk and as a priest, as a chaplain. So how did that happen? Well, a lot of things happened. And the question that I'm always being asked is, what made you want to become a monk? And there's no one thing that happened. I think it's just a series of life events that shapes us and makes us who we are. And so throughout, I was quite inquisitive about Hinduism. Even though we were disconnected, I feel fortunate that my parents had a small altar at home in which they had different pictures of all the different gods, or many of the different gods. And they would offer an incense every day, offer flour every day to the altar, and then they would do some meditation every day. And seeing them do all of this, I naturally felt inclined to follow in their footsteps. They never pushed me or forced me, but I would just do it on my own. So I would also offer incense and flour, and I would do some mantra meditation. So meditating on the names of God using mantras, which means repetition of sacred sounds, and basically hearing the name of God. So by hearing the name of God, I was connecting with God. Just like if you hear the name of somebody that you care for, even if that's not the person being called, you'll think of the person you care for with that same name. Right? So you formed a connection with that person in your mind, even if those two people may be having a conversation about somebody completely different. So, but you formed a connection. So mantra meditation, the audible recitation of sounds of the name of God, helps one connect with God. And so I've been doing that for the last 30 years or so, just watching my parents do it. But the thing is, I didn't have any philosophical background, understanding of why I was doing what I was doing. My parents never explained that to me. Like most Indian parents or Asian parents, the most important thing when you come to this country is economic development and financial stability. So they were focused on that. So I couldn't really talk about Hinduism with anyone, and nor would I discuss it with my friends outside, because I was the only Hindu and our religion really stuck out from everyone else, because I was around basically all Christian friends. And I went to a Christian high school. My parents sent me to a Christian high school in Glendale for 4 years of Christian high school. So, we had so many gods, and, and they've got one God, and, we're lighting incense and they're not, and, so it's like, our food looks different, and so everything was different. So I made sure to keep my Hinduism at home, because, if you're that different, you're definitely going to get ridiculed. So I wanted to make sure, and I already had experienced that a little bit. So I wanted to make sure that my Hinduism remained private, remained at home, and it never really made it outside the home. So being fairly disconnected, and my parents, we had a copy of some Hindu scriptures at home, the Bhagavad Gita. I'm guessing you're probably familiar with it, a lot of you. The Bhagavad Gita literally means a song of God. It's probably the most important Hindu text in all of India. We had copies of the Bhagavad Gita, but it never made any sense to me. Like, I tried to look at it a couple of times. I opened it up. I'd tried to read it, but it never really resonated with me. It didn't seem relevant to me. And I think part of the reason was because life in LA was really good for me. Like, my parents struggled really hard initially when they first came to this country. They spent several years on Venice Beach. I'm sure you all know Venice Beach, right? Okay. So they spent several years at Venice Beach selling things, had a little shop on the boardwalk there. And those were my first years in this country, were on Venice Beach, actually. Basically, I was at the beach all the time. Since the age of 7 or 8, I developed a love for the ocean. And skateboarding up and down the boardwalk, listening to funk music and rap music. That's what I was doing. There was basketball courts, and that was my upbringing. I was like the only Indian kid doing these things in the early 80s, listening to funk music. So, but that was my initial exposure, and that's kind of, my identity formed around that. And then gradually my parents developed a very successful jewelry business that turned into a multi-million-dollar jewelry business. And it really spanned the entire country. They had thousands of clients. My dad built this amazing house. Everything is in the past tense, okay? So he built this house, $1 million house on the hill with a swimming pool, with a jacuzzi, waterfall overlooking all of LA. Actually, on Google Maps, I should pull it up. You can actually see the house. It blows your mind. It looks like people used to think it was an apartment apartment building when he came up there. So life was good, and I think that was part of the reason, maybe not for everybody, but for me, that the Bhagavad Gita didn't really resonate with me. I didn't need the Bhagavad Gita for anything in my life. It was curiosity. But it was in 1993 that things were going to take a turn. You could say a turn for the worse, but in retrospect, I think it was the turn for the best. My parents' jewelry factory that they had, my dad had an electrical plating plant where he would actually manufacture and plate the jewelry. It caught on fire, and the whole thing burnt. And we literally lost, the entire business, the inventory, we lost our clients, and because that business was supporting everything that we had, we lost our other properties, and we also lost our really big and beautiful house. And when we lost all of this, and then we also, our cars were taken, and it was really like a full-on disaster. It's like, the higher you go, the harder you fall, I say. That's kind of what happened. So my dad, in an attempt to figure out what the next step would be for his family, he got a lead from some business associates that East Europe, there's a lot of business opportunities in East Europe. And that, so he decided to go to East Europe, to Bulgaria. This is 1993. Bulgaria was just coming out of communism. Just a year ago, it had come out of communism at that time. So he was looking for ways to import things from India and maybe reestablish his fortune somehow, because when you've lived that kind of lifestyle, it's hard to live simply. So he's in Bulgaria. I'm in my third year of college. And we're close to losing our house. I would worry if my car is just going to be taken or something by the bank. It was really stressful, really difficult. And at one point I told my dad that, this is really difficult. I might as well just come over to Bulgaria and we might as well just be together and do whatever it is, because it's living in this kind of uncertainty is really difficult. So my mom and and I'm an only child, right? So my mom and I decided, okay, we're just going to go off to Bulgaria. Just kind of left everything behind, just literally uprooted ourselves with a couple of suitcases and went off to Bulgaria. We went from living in a 6-bedroom house, right, to a 1-bedroom apartment, which is probably a little bit bigger than a Manhattan 1-bedroom apartment. Literally, that was a shift our life took. Fortunately, I had a copy of the Bhagavad Gita with me. I'm 21 at that time. Okay. And I decided, well, I don't have much to do here in Bulgaria because I'm trying to help my dad's business, but it's just starting up, so I'm going to have a lot of free time. And there's nobody in that country that speaks English. There's a few people here and there who speak English, and if you speak English, it's you're like something special. It's special that you speak English, because everybody spoke Bulgarian and Russian. The television had 2 languages only. All the programs were in either Russian or Bulgarian. All the movies in the theaters were a year or 2 old that I'd already seen. So I didn't have a whole lot to do. And I found myself again in a situation where I was pretty much the only Indian, I think, in Bulgaria. There was a few students here and there. So I was the only brown guy walking around. And I really felt awkward. And this was East Europe. They weren't so familiar with other cultures, and because they had kind of really kept themselves closed off under the communist rule. So it was I felt like I was in a fishbowl or something, and it was quite uncomfortable. And I had a chance to experience a little bit of racism and this and that. I could once I learned the language a little, I could hear them talking, And so it was, I guess it was good to experience that, just to know what it's like, to how people could sometimes feel that. But that was the time when I said, okay, I'm going to start reading the Bhagavad Gita. So I opened up the Bhagavad Gita, and lo and behold, it started to make perfect sense to me. And I thought that this was really interesting because, and the thing I was able to relate to about the Bhagavad Gita was that Arjuna, for some of you I'm guessing are not familiar with the Bhagavad Gita. How many of you are familiar with the Bhagavad Gita? Just raise your hand. I'm not going to ask you any questions from the Gita. I just kind of want to get an idea. 2 people did this, so I don't even know what that means. Okay, all right. Okay, so we got 5 people that had the courage to kind of raise their hands. So the Bhagavad Gita, it takes place on a battlefield where Arjuna is a warrior. He's been trained as a warrior his whole life. And he's not just a warrior. He was the best warrior in the entire army, basically. Number 1. The man was so determined that, and he was an archer especially, that if he didn't perfect his archery, he wouldn't sleep at night. He would practice all night. And he wanted to perfect it so much that he would actually practice his archery with blindfolded. So he could hit anything just through sound. So he was imagine somebody that determined. Maybe some of you know somebody that ambitious and determined. And they're very intense people. So he was like that. He'd never lost a fight in his life. He's always succeeded. And he was going to determine the outcome of that battle. And he gets on this battlefield and he becomes completely confused about whether or not he should fight. He loses his composure. In the first chapter, he's talking to Krishna. Of course, Krishna, the song of God, so Krishna's God. Krishna's driving Arjuna's chariot. And Arjuna's asking Krishna, can you please take my chariot into the middle of the battlefield so I can see who I have to contend with? So Krishna drives his chariot into the middle of the battlefield. Arjuna sees that a lot of his relatives are on the other side because this battle is a family feud, basically. It's not a religious war. It's a family feud. That's what's taking place. So it's not one religion over another. That's really important to clarify. Arjuna and his brothers were ousted from the kingdom. The kingdom rightfully belonged to them. They were ousted from the kingdom by their cousins, and the cousins refused to give it back. It's a very long story. It's only 100,000 Sanskrit verses long. It's longer than the Homer and Iliad combined, so I can't really get into too much of it. We'll just go on for hours. So Arjuna is trying to get his kingdom back. And when he sees his relatives on the other side, and he knows that they're there, he's always known that they're there, he has a mental breakdown. He tells Krishna that my mind is, seeing my relatives on the other side, my mind is reeling. My hair is standing on end. My hands are quivering. My bow is slipping from my hands. And I'm having a hard time just standing on my own 2 feet. And at one point, Arjuna puts aside his bow and decides to sit down on the chariot. Unable to fight, unwilling to fight. But he says that, I don't think it's worth it to go into this battle. Because I don't want to hurt my family. There may be sinful reactions. And if all of these soldiers die, it's going to leave a lot of widows and children without fathers. I just don't think it's worth getting into this thing. He's giving a lot of good reasons, but he has a complete breakdown, and he doesn't know what to do. But he doesn't leave the battlefield either. He doesn't say, I'm not going to fight. He says, I'm not going to fight, but he sits right there. He stays there. So when I read about Arjuna's frame of mind, I could naturally relate to his frame of mind. When I was reading the Bhagavad Gita, like he had been ousted from his kingdom, and we kind of like left our little kingdom in LA. And I didn't know where my life was going. Just 6 months, a year ago, it seemed like my life was set. Like we were living the American dream. I just had to get a little older and take over the business. I wouldn't have to worry about anything. Going from that much certainty to complete uncertainty, I was wondering, am I just going to be living the rest of my life in Bulgaria? And these thoughts were going through my mind because we had nothing in LA to go back to. So when I first read this chapter and learned about what Arjuna was going through, I realized this text is so relevant. It's taking place on a battlefield to somebody who's going through a crisis in their life. And I'm sure we can all relate to that. I'm sure we all have gone through some crises in our life. Maybe we are, at the moment, going through some crises in our life. Maybe it's a financial crisis. Maybe it's a relationship crisis. Maybe it's some kind of emotional or mental crisis. Maybe it's some kind of a health crisis. We're always going through something or another. One of these things is somehow making its way into our life, sometimes maybe more than one. So now when I read that, I was thinking, okay, this text is quite relevant because it's dealing with just the human predicament. What can happen to us as human beings? And the first thing that Krishna tells Arjuna to help him come out of this despondency that Arjuna has kind of sunk himself into, the first teaching of the Bhagavad Gita, and I'd like to think this is probably the most important teaching of Hinduism, the foundational teaching on which all the other teachings of the Bhagavad Gita are built on. Krishna tells Arjuna that Arjuna, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor shall we ever cease to be. So basically what he's saying is that the soul is eternal. For the soul there is neither birth nor death at any time. Just as the embodied soul goes through boyhood to youth to old age, the soul goes through another body at the time of death. So the soul cannot be killed by anything. It cannot be burnt by fire. It cannot be moistened by water. It cannot be withered by the wind. The soul is eternal. So this is the very first teaching of the Bhagavad Gita. It's telling us who we are. And when I first read this, it kind of blew my mind. Because Krishna continues to explain to Arjuna that the soul is the driver and this body is just the vehicle. So you are driving this vehicle. We are driving our vehicles. We all have different vehicles, different shapes, different sizes, different models. Mine's a 1972 Indian, brown. We've all got our own makes and models, right? So, and that's so powerful because that, when I first read that, I'm by myself, I'm thinking, wait a second, I'm not who I think I am? According to the Bhagavad Gita, I'm not. It's like me saying, hey, look, I'm a cotton sweater. Wouldn't that sound kind of crazy? That would, right? Hey, what do you look like? Oh, I'm a cotton sweater. No, this is the clothing that I wear. And it's interesting that we're all identifying with the body. We can even say that most of the problems on this planet are taking place because of bodily identification. Racial battles, gender battles, all kinds of bodily identification. Religious wars, I'm better than you, I'm better than you. But if you look at it from the equal vision perspective of the Bhagavad Gita, we're actually all spiritual beings living inside different vehicles. That's it. And the Bhagavad Gita says, just as an individual gives up old clothes and puts on new ones, the soul gives up the old body and accepts a new one at the time of death. So what happens is, at the time of death, so the soul and reincarnation are the first teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. And these teachings really hit me hard, really, because I was in a kind of a humble state, because we had already gone through so much. And when I read this, it sunk in deeply within inside of me. Like I was finally figuring out who I was. And this idea of reincarnation is incredibly powerful, because what it's explained that at the time of death, our mind and the soul, the mind goes with the soul and enters another womb. And that's where our new body is being formed. So at the time of birth, you're pretty much the same person you were in your previous life, because you have the same mind. And the mind is like your hard drive. You know how in your hard drive you store all kinds of stuff? You don't even realize that old files, when you go through it, you like clean, like, what is this? Why am I holding on to this 20-year-old file, you know? So the mind stores every impression that you see. Everything you see, smell, taste, or touch, the mind stores it. It's all in there. And that's why sometimes if you look at little children, they've kind of almost like they're determined to do certain things. They kind of know almost who they are. Like they like things and don't like certain things. And it's because the mind's already had a previous existence. And our current life and birth and the things that are happening to us and with us in our life is determined by our previous lives karma. Not just life, previous lives karma. So karma means activity. Then there's good karma and then there's bad karma. And kind of like the biblical saying, as you sow, so shall you reap, or what goes around comes around, karma is very much that principle. So everything we do in our lifetimes, everything, it gets recorded by God within the heart. And it comes back to us either in the same life or a future life, maybe 2 lives later, we don't know. The simplest way I feel like I can explain karma, and way that hopefully we can relate to it, is like of a credit card. You know, like on Black Friday, you kind of go crazy with your credit cards, swiping away. The bill comes later. Right? The bill comes later, 30 days later, and maybe you don't pay the whole thing off. Okay, well the bill comes later, again, a month later, and it's still there. So you could be paying, you know, I used to be in the mortgage business a while ago. I think mortgages helped me become a monk, actually. Dealing with the mortgage business helped me. Mortgages to monks. I could have retitled my book that way. But you know, in mortgages, I remember I used to give people a mortgage, an equity loan on their house, and they would pay off, like, you know, I'm looking at their credit card report, like Macy's and, you know, like all kinds of Circuit City. I'm like, my God, they're going to be paying for this for 20 years. They're going to be paying for that, you know, like that DVD player or whatever, you know. So, but a simple way to explain karma is that. Is previous life stuff is coming through to us. And the way to really overcome karma, because the goal described within the Bhagavad Gita in the 8th chapter is that we ultimately want to go beyond or transcend the cycle of birth and death in the world of matter. Because the world of matter, the 8th chapter, Krishna describes that this is a place where birth and death are always taking place, and happiness and distress are always happening. Even whether we want it or not, happiness and distress are coming through our lives. And ultimately, Krishna is saying we want to get to that abode where annihilation does not take place. It's an eternal realm where the soul lives in its original spiritual form. In its original spiritual form. It doesn't have a material body covering it. And we can see most suffering is taking place because of the material body. And the moment that body is gone, through transcendence and liberation, the suffering basically ends. So Krishna explains that those who achieve that abode never have to come to this world of matter again. So this was the first set of teachings that I was exposed to. And the thing is, I was on my own, so I couldn't discuss it with anybody. I was 21. I couldn't ask anyone any questions. So I was processing this myself when I'm like sitting in Bulgaria. The next set of teachings, well, so we spent a couple years in Bulgaria, a couple of kind of crazy years in Bulgaria. And when you turn a country's government upside down or give it a new government, it's never an easy transition. And so Bulgaria had a really rough time with that. But it was also becoming really unstable in terms of corruption, so we realized that it wasn't safe for us. So after a couple of years, we decided to move. We came back to the US. My dad didn't really want to go back to LA because of all the memories. So we decided to move to the East Coast. Now my folks live in Jersey. And they wanted to be close to New York City. Then we're doing different things. Life's never really been the same. There's a lot of struggle going on. So I'm continuing to read the Bhagavad Gita and other Hindu scriptures. Then when I started working as a loan officer in a mortgage company, I was like, I wanted to go deeper into my spirituality because I was really looking for answers. And the Bhagavad Gita really helped me in Bulgaria. I don't know how I would have processed all the loss that I had experienced if it wasn't for the Bhagavad Gita. So the next teaching that I started to explore as we moved back to the US was the teachings of Ahimsa, which literally means non-violence. It's a very prominent teaching, one of the prominent teachings of Buddhism, but also Hinduism. So Ahimsa means non-violence. And the way that Hindus practice non-violence, in many ways actually, it's not just one, is through a vegetarian diet, by adopting a vegetarian diet. And the reason why many Hindus practice a vegetarian diet, I mean, why? Okay, why do you guys practice vegetarianism? Like, what's the significance about it? How does it help? How is it spiritually connected? So the idea is we're trying to develop, I think most traditions would agree that we're trying to develop love of God. Right? And in order to love God, Hinduism says you have to be able to love all of God's creatures. See them also as people. So we have to be able to see, again, with equal vision, right? Not just people of different races and colors and genders and religion, but we also have to see with equal vision the animals, because Hinduism believes that there are souls within inside animals. Why not? They reproduce, they cry, they laugh, they enjoy, they do everything we do basically. I saw this one piece on CNN not too long ago where a dog, where the owner passed away, and the owner used to go to church every Sunday, and after the owner passed away, the dog continued to go to church every Sunday. Like, no joke. This was on CNN. And the dog would just go sit for the church service, and nobody said anything. They knew that the dog was actually in mourning or something. And would do that for it just kept doing it every single week. It was on CNN. It was like it would bring tears to your eyes. So is that dog not as much a person as we are? So that's what Hinduism's forcing us to do, is to really see with equal vision. I believe it was Peter Singer who wrote Animal Liberation, talked about that first, we had, there's been sexism, then there's been racism, and he says now we have what's called speciesism. So it's like not seeing one species as better than the other, right? Or seeing one race as better than the other in racism. So the idea is that we're seeing that somehow we as a species are better than the animals. And so therefore it's okay to cause harm to them because they're maybe less intelligent, or maybe they're weaker, or whatever it may be. So the idea is to uplift our consciousness, that there's no need to cause pain and fear to other living beings. So to really live in a harmony, as much harmony as possible. And also the idea behind speciesism is that it's interesting that we as human beings have decided that dogs and cats will get certain rights, where pigs and cows and chickens will have certain rights. Doesn't that very much smell of some things in our history that we're not very proud of? Okay, these two, if you kick, if you kick or mistreat it, you go to jail, and these can be killed. Just something to think about. In Canada, they had a nice campaign on the subways. They put pictures of chickens and pigs and cows, and then cats and dogs. Why love one and eat the other? And people oh my God, yeah. Yeah, I'm a real animal rights activist, but I just had a cheeseburger for lunch. So it's really interesting how in our society we have this kind of a, duality, how we mistreat so many other things. So Hinduism is like, if we want to live, really develop love for God, we have to love all of God's creatures. The two-legged, the four-legged, the winged, the gilled, let's just love everybody. We need a little more love in this world. So that was the second teaching. Now, I was a carnivore growing up. I ate anything that could run away from me, I would eat it, I wasn't a cannibal, a carnivore. So like for me, I would eat meat twice a day. I was just like, besides my cereal in the morning, lunch had to have some meat, and dinner, I just kind of had to have it. You didn't even think about it, actually. It took me a whole year to kind of wean myself off of meat. I had to do it really gradually because it was kind of difficult. But the last 16 years or so, I've been a vegetarian. And another practice, so that's what the second practice I started to really adopt into my life. And one thing that I kind of wanted to talk about, because we're talking about the Bhagavad Gita and we're talking about Arjuna and Krishna, one concept of God that I found very fascinating, which I hadn't been exposed to before. The concept of Krishna. Krishna means literally all attractive. So according to the Bhagavad Gita, according to the Gita, that Krishna is a supreme deity, the same deity that the Muslims can call Allah, or Jehovah, or Yahweh, Krishna. It's the same individual, same supreme being. That's our understanding from my Vaishnav perspective. Other Hindus would disagree with me. Not all, some would disagree with me that Krishna is a supreme deity. So I just want to throw that out there, right? What I found very fascinating about the concept of Krishna as a supreme deity is that on the battlefield of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is actually driving Arjuna's chariot. Now, a chariot driver or a driver is not seen as a very high position in society, at least in India. Here's God coming down to serve his devotee as a servant. And some of the characteristics of Krishna are that he prefers to serve more than being served or worshipped. That he gets greater pleasure out of serving than being served. And I think we can, to some degree, relate. We get pleasure in serving others, right? When we really help somebody, there's somebody we care for, we help them or do some service for them, it actually gives us joy. More joy than anything else, actually. So why shouldn't God take advantage of that enjoyment? So, and it's explained that throughout the battle, Krishna is driving the chariot, Arjuna is giving him orders. You've got to tell him what to do. And the whole time, Krishna is just really, with full happiness, taking orders from his devotee. And at one point, there's another instance in which one devotee asks Krishna for forgiveness for doing something wrong or offending Krishna. Krishna says, just as a mother is not offended when a child in the womb kicks, I cannot be offended by your actions. Interesting, right? If somebody else kicked you, you wouldn't be happy. But when the child in the womb kicks, it brings the mother joy. Like, okay, it's alive, it's kicking, And so that's how Krishna takes the offenses of the devotees. So these were some concepts that were very, very, I'd never come across a concept of God who likes to serve and takes a menial role, almost a mood of humility. So this was very fascinating for me and very kind of out of the box. And so for me, this theology was very, very powerful. I don't know what time it is. Okay, so we should, we have to go to 11? Is that it? 11:05. 11:05. Should we take questions now, or should I keep going?
Maybe 5 more minutes.
5 more minutes, okay. So in 1999, after 8 years of a roller coaster ride for me, from going from LA to Bulgaria to New Jersey, I finally decided I need to go deep into my spirituality. And the only way I could do that, I feel like I had to just remove myself from everything around me, from everything familiar, and go to India. So in September of 1999, I went to a monastery in Mumbai, India. What the important thing is that I didn't go there with the idea of becoming a monk. that wasn't the plan. I just needed a break from my life and take time to reflect and introspect and figure out who I was. So I decided just for a month, go to a monastery. You know, people take retreats. I'm going to go meditate, pray, worship, you know, and study the scriptures, hang out with monks, and have deep conversations, and just do that kind of thing. I went there, and, you know, I'd never lived, you know, as I mentioned, I'm an only child. And you know, that means like I've always had my own facilities to myself and never had to share. And I'm going to be living in a place with 40 other monks. And it's communal, right? There's like 4 or 5 bathrooms that everyone lines up to use in the morning. And the morning services start at 5, so people are getting up at 4, and there's like a mad rush to the bathroom. And, you know, you're just like, you're in the bathroom, and there's like 4 guys waiting for you. It's not like, you know, you're not peaceful in that, you know, doing your business. When you know there's people waiting outside. This is like the first experience I had of this. And you know, 5 o'clock, we're praying, we're singing, there's like devotional dancing going on. I'm meditating for an hour and a half every morning. And you know, it brought me the greatest joy of my life. You know, I was sleeping, and I took my sleeping bag. I still sleep in a sleeping bag, actually. And I had a thin straw mat at that time, and in India, so I was on a thin straw mat, sleeping on the floor with like, you know, 10 other people, just like basically, you know, in that same hallway. And it was just the most joyous, blissful, soul-filling experience I think that I've ever had. That 1 month, I extended it to 6 months. Came back, moved into the monastery in Manhattan. And I've been a monk for the last 14 years, just like that. I actually decided, like I said, it was never a plan to become a monk. And that's why I actually wrote the book. The book was actually a reflection of my own life. It started as a reflective journal. Initially, I didn't plan to publish it. But then at the suggestion of a couple of people, they said, oh, this could be a really good read for the Western public to learn about your journey and how you dealt with difficult times, and to give them a basic exposure to Hinduism in an accessible way. So based on some feedback, I decided to add more to it and turn it into a book. So, so that's that. Now, maybe we can take some questions, and I'll let you field the questions if anybody has any questions. So the question is, like some other monks can't get married, can't have children, you know. So there's 2 stages of monastic life within our tradition. One is the student phase, and one is the more formal stage. In the student phase, which I'm in, you can choose to move out of the monastery and get married anytime you want. I mean, you know, while in the monastery, you obviously can't have like a girlfriend and get married, you know, then you're not a monk anymore. So you would have to move out. And I've just recently, like a couple months ago, a friend of mine, we've been monks for like 10 years together. He decided that he wants to move forward, get married, and, you know, pursue a family. So that option is totally available if you decide to choose that option. Yeah. Yeah, then you just wouldn't be a monk. Then you would just be a married person, and you could still do all your other spiritual practices, you know. But yeah, you can't hold that title anymore, right, you know. It's not like, you know, once you're not the president anymore, you still get called Mr. President, you know. It's not exactly like that. You don't get to keep the title. There's a few principles within Hinduism. They're religious principles, but they have health consequences. So I'll talk about it from that angle, and I'm hoping that addresses what you want me to address. One of them I already talked about a little bit, the idea of a vegetarian diet, right? And the more, if you look at it, you know, there's so many studies I've read, like on NPR and other places, that meat eating has a very strong connection to cancer. You know, colon cancer, especially breast cancer, lung cancer, even all kinds of cancers. So not only spiritually, I mean, I think it's kind of great that a practice can help you grow spiritually, but also improve your health. You know, so it also helps your health, because it's explained that, like, you know, the animals, they have much stronger capacity to digest meat than human beings do. Like, the meat just doesn't pass through our system as quickly and easily as it would through an animal's body. Their digestive acids are strong, their intestines are smaller, everything like that. So that helps. Plus, I don't know how many of you are aware, but according to the UN, Food and Agriculture Organization, the meat industry gives off 18% of all greenhouse emissions, which outdoes the auto industry. So the meat industry is polluting the environment more than the automobile industry. That means all cars, buses, trucks, planes, everything combined. because of all the animals that they're raising and all the fuel that's being used to raise them and all the water that's being wasted, all the grains that are being fed to, like 70% of our grains go to animals. So it's good for the body, our own environment, and it's also good for the external environment. Another practice that's recommended within Hinduism for one's own mind actually is refraining from like alcoholic beverages. And I'm not saying like, okay, all Hindus like, no, that's not the thing, but this is what Hinduism is saying, that because it has a tendency to mess with the mind, it does, right? When you like too much and you can't really fully perform the way you could normally. Saying that because it does affect the mind, and a lot of our spiritual advancement is based on the mind being developed and strong and focused all the time. And plus, of course, we know that it has some like liver damage and other things that does cause some damage to the body. A friend of mine just recently said that, yeah, they were studying, she's a med student, like just didn't realize how damaging alcohol is to the entire body actually. Like it affects every part of your body. I was like, really? I didn't know that. So that's another aspect of like a spiritual, it's not even a spiritual practice, it's recommended that it'll help you in your spiritual progress. It's not like you're going to go to hell because of it. It's like, hey, it'll help your mind. Like if you're trying to practice with a marathon, then maybe it's better you not eat certain things, and it's better that you do eat certain things. You can still eat those things that you're not supposed to. It may just make it a little bit, your performance may be affected a little bit. So that's kind of how it's seen. And we really feel like physical health is going to depend on mental health. If you're really stressed and worried about everything, your body's going to break down. We know that stress affects the whole immune system and everything. And so these things that I talked about, they really affect the mind. And that's why we do a lot of meditation, because meditation is meant to strengthen the mind actually. And with a strong mind, focused mind, a healthy mind, it'll affect your work, relationships, everything. Your whole outlook on life and outlook on difficult situations is different when you have a good, strong mind. Yeah, sadhu is basically somebody who's worshiping, praying God. There's different ways to pray to God, I think, I don't think there's just one way to do it. We use mantra meditation and beads. Others may do it through prayer and through more like austerity. I think different traditions have different way of doing it, I don't think like all monks do it the same way. Even different Hindu monks do it different ways. Some Hindu monks just sit and meditate and do yoga for like, years on end in the mountain ranges, They do that. So I think there's a variety of ways to do it. Anything that messes with the mind from our tradition, like we shouldn't need an external substance to help me realize God. The stuff that I need, the equipment that I need to understand God is like in here. You know what I mean? Everything I need for spiritual perfection is between up here and my feet. It's all, the whole package was given to us. We don't need anything from outside to make us spiritually or emotionally or mentally healthy. It's all up here. Like how much can you own and how much can you possess? Is that your question? I don't think there's like a one answer for everybody here. I think you have to be able to look at your own mind and emotions and see how much you're being carried away by your possessions. If you have so many things that you're just always worrying about, you want that really nice car. Okay, now you got the really nice car. Now you're always wondering if someone's going to scratch it or something, or if you get if your possessions are now controlling you, then I think that may be a little unhealthy. Yeah.
For you as a monk.
Oh, for me as a monk. Oh, okay, you have specific questions. Okay. Basically, the idea is whatever I need to do what I'm doing. Like, okay, I have a computer. If I didn't have a computer and do email, I wouldn't be standing here. Dr. Wood wouldn't be able to get in touch with me. So I have a phone because as a chaplain, I'm in touch with students and people and doing all kinds of work. So the technology that I use, basically, whatever I use, it's for serving God and servicing people, basically. So you try to keep it kind of minimal, and but you also, the world requires you to be a certain level of comfort. You need to have a certain level of comfort. So it's always a balance. It's never easy. You have to say, do I need this? Do I not need this? Okay, do I need a new pair of shoes? Okay, I'm going to wait till they're really, really old. So I always have to do this, That's a constant struggle to make sure that as a monk, I don't go too far over. That to stay kind of, within my means and, yeah?
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Okay.
Big round of applause.
Thank you.